Belfast, Northern Ireland, late last month. Newsmen here getting their first look at a new sports car to be produced in suburban Dunmurry. It's the biggest industrial news in this troubled province in years. Northern Ireland's Minister of Commerce, Giles Shore, is on hand. There's a lot of government money at stake. $120 million in loans and outright grants to get this car ready for production by summer. The tall man in the finely tailored suit makes only a brief appearance for the cameras, but this ceremony is really his show. John DeLorean has sold the British government and American investors on his long-time dream of a car to compete in America with Porsche and Corvette. It's been quite a journey that has finally brought DeLorean at age 54 to this Irish test track. A lot of miles and a lot of cars and all of the driving and living in the fast lane. The first thought that occurs when you start to tell John DeLorean's story is what a good movie it would make. TWA's In-Flight magazine even created an imaginary playbill. The story has one of those dream cars, DeLorean's DMC-12, to go on sale next fall.
You have a remarkable mouth.
And the story has beautiful women, like model and actress Kelly Harmon, his second wife, and national cover girl Christina Ferrara, his present wife, and singer Nancy Sinatra and movie star Ursula Andress, DeLorean companions between marriages.
Here's Johnny!
And Johnny Carson, an investor in DeLorean's new company and commercial spokesman for the sports car. And the New York Yankees, one of the enterprises DeLorean put his money into when the automotive business made him a millionaire. And these British soldiers who helped provide security for DeLorean's new factory. John DeLorean's story is basically a Detroit story. He was born and raised in our city, made his fame and fortune at General Motors. But to find out what John DeLorean is doing today, I had to travel nearly halfway around the world. And my first stop, smack dab here in Midtown Manhattan.
Good afternoon, DeLorean Motor Company.
In this Park Avenue tower, I found John DeLorean, directing the company which will build a stainless steel sports car beginning this summer. There's an atmosphere of success in these flashy offices, but no disguising the fact DeLorean is on that dangerous road which led to ruin for others who dreamed of bringing out their own cars.
In the 1940s, a guy named Preston Tucker from Ypsilanti built the Tucker Torpedo. Failed. 1970s, Malcolm Bricklin built the Bricklin sports car in Canada. Failed. What's going to make DeLorean different?
Well, I think the biggest difference, at least we think the biggest difference, is the fact that we have a very professional organization of people who have spent their life in the automobile business and who really know it very well. The people you mentioned particularly really were guys who knew nothing about automobiles. You got to remember that in other places in the world, a number of very successful businesses have been started. BMW is an example. 16 years ago, there was no BMW. It was a little motorcycle company that was in bankruptcy.
From DeLorean's new office, I could see the skyscraper where he quit General Motors in 1973. He was a group vice president then, making $650,000 a year. But his flamboyance, tolerated at Pontiac and Chevy, didn't go over well on GM's 14th floor.
While I was running a division, I really enjoyed myself. It was like being a quarterback. And when I got out of the operating side of it, I didn't enjoy it at all. I just didn't fit in. I also felt that, and it became very obvious, that some of the pettiness and jealousies that had surrounded me, I was really immune from when I was running a division, because in the end, it's how many cars did you sell and how much money did you make. And if, as long as you did those well, nobody could criticize anything else in your life or your lifestyle or your management style. As soon as you become a group executive, you don't have that measurement anymore. You suddenly become subject to the whims and the vicissitudes and the personal prejudices of the people who surround you.
Did you have the feeling that the way you dressed and the way you looked was rubbing some people the wrong way?
Oh, I'm sure that was right. I was told that a number of times.
I would look at it and say, gee, you were making $500,000, $600,000 a year. Why didn't you get your hair cut? I mean, if there was that much at stake.
Well, that's not the way I look at things.
So John DeLorean was on his own in 1973 with an idea for a new sports car, but not much else. He jokes that he lived off his wife Christina's $2,000 a day model salary for a while. Now the sports car is finally to become a reality, but not in Detroit, which tried hard to attract the plant to a site on the east side. Instead, DeLorean went to Northern Ireland, and to find out the reasons, so did I. The dreamlike vistas of the Irish countryside create a feeling of this place that is soothing but misleading. The DeLorean plant is located just outside Belfast, a city which is still, in effect, a war zone. Even after trying to prepare for what I would see, my first taste of Belfast life came as a shock. Arriving at our hotel here just outside Belfast, the first thing we saw on the approach road was a sign warning of guard dogs. Then the entire compound ringed by a barbed wire fence. Entry only through this gate.
May I see your bag, please, sir?
Before entering the hotel, each bag is checked by a private security officer. There's good reason for this. Bombers have struck repeatedly all over Northern Ireland. And a few years back, an explosion damaged our hotel. In 11 years of violence between Catholics and Protestants here, over 2,000 have been killed. In my days in Belfast, I got used to the Northern Ireland body search.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
John DeLorean's factory is right in the middle of it. Just next door is Twinbrook, an all-Catholic public housing project known to be a stronghold of the Irish Republican Army. A very nervous DeLorean PR man, who's Protestant, took me to meet a Catholic priest said to be in close touch with the IRA. The company's objective, to prove that the plant's hiring policy will prevent violence.
When I heard of the DeLorean's intention of coming here, I said it's just too good to be true. Twinbrook now is associated with DeLorean. Prior to DeLorean, Twinbrook was associated with violence, vandalism, destruction. It's given the whole area a whole facelift.
Now, inside the plant, Catholics will be working alongside Protestants. How do you think that will work out?
Fine, no problem.
The promises of peace have been backed up by a lot of British cash, $120 million in loans and outright grants to DeLorean. Plus, the plant's assemblers will make only $136 a week, a substantial savings compared to UAW labor. John DeLorean knows a good deal when he sees one and plays down the risk of violence in Belfast.
I had an interesting conversation, I think, when this young man who did the story in the Free Press parade section called me up, and I think I was in Belfast at the time, and he asked me the same question. And I said, well, I'll make a deal with you tonight. I said, is the Free Press still down on, is it Lafayette? He said, yeah. And I said, well, I'll make you an interesting arrangement. I said, tonight at midnight, I'll go out and I'll take a 1-hour walk around downtown Belfast, and you go take a 1-hour walk around downtown Detroit. He said, what are you, nuts?
No argument Detroit has a street crime problem, but to compare our troubles to the situation here is a little bit far out. We've only been here 3 days, and in that time, a policeman has been shot and killed at a soccer field, a cab driver killed by a rock thrown through a windshield. John DeLorean, on the security matter, is taking a big gamble here. But on Tuesday night at the ERIGLE pub, you'd never know there was a security problem in Belfast, unless, of course, you met the men at the door who frisk anyone looking suspicious. To the young men and women I met here, John DeLorean is something of a hero because he's bringing jobs to this city. The gaiety of the music of the group Blackthorn masks a grim economic situation in Northern Ireland. The Catholic Protestant violence, which has killed more than 2,000, has also driven out business. Unemployment averages 12%, 30% in some areas. The DeLorean sports car plant will create 2,000 jobs when it goes into full operation this summer. The British government spent $120 million to outbid Detroit and Puerto Rico for the plant. Jobs are needed that badly. 200 are employed here now, including this man who, before DeLorean came, had to go far from home to find work.
Previously in DeLorean, with the unemployment there again, I was working in Zambia for 3 years in the copper belt. Contract finished, so coming home to unemployment, faced with not much, but overseas again.
So you'd had to go to Africa to get a job because you couldn't find one here at home?
That's quite true, yes.
So DeLorean is a homecoming for you?
I would say so, very much, and for others in Ireland.
Now, some of the auto workers in Detroit and people with the auto industry see Belfast as mainly a shipbuilding area. And you build cars here, too?
Well, put it this way, we got the name of being the best shipbuilders in the world. Surely we can get the name of the best car makers in the world.
Burns and his Irish workers will build the DMC-12 sports car using the team concept pioneered at Volvo in Sweden. Workers will be trained in several jobs, and instead of a U.S.-style assembly line, the bodies and chassis will come to the workers on battery-powered robot carriers. To avoid terrorism, DeLorean is hiring large numbers of Catholics and Protestants, and has put his manpower needs in the hands of a human relations specialist.
That in general, in the workplace, the troubles have never really come into being. There's a complete history throughout the province of harmony, and there certainly our experiences here to date would bear this out. We have a very happy team, only waiting for the product to get off the production lines.
In your hiring, how are you breaking down the hiring of Catholics and Protestants?
Well, obviously, we're not going out to get absolute 50-50. That is impossible, impractical. But we are an international firm. We see ourselves as such.
Everyone we talk to in Belfast says things are better now, but violence and war zone type security remain a fact of life. In downtown Belfast, pedestrians must pass British Army checkpoints like this. Even a child with a toy gun brings a nervous, angry reaction.
It's one of the toughest things I ever seen. You want to get yourself shot?
DeLorean's people point out that shipping and other industries, even a General Motors seatbelt plant, exist here in spite of the troubles. And DeLorean's sweet financial deal has also given his company a big boost. But the reason why many experts give DeLorean a fair chance of success is his track record in the car business. DeLorean's past career has already marked him as one of the automotive industry's all-time great success stories.
Little GTO, you really looking fine. 3 deuces and a 4-speed and a 389.
The early 60s, era of the high-performance muscle cars, and the big winner on the speedways, the drag strips, and the 10-day sales charts is Pontiac. The success of GTO and other trophy-winning models makes a name for a young engineer. He takes much of the credit for development of the new cars and promotion of them, even helping a record label make this Pontiac song a hit. The man is John DeLorean.
I had built a car for myself, and that is I'd taken, at that time, Pontiac used to sell a car called a Tempest, and I took the Tempest, which was a light intermediate car, and I took out the standard four-cylinder engine, put in the larger V8, and driving it around, everybody got so excited about the car, and they all wanted to borrow it, and this and that. We decided there was a market for it. At that time, the sales manager of Pontiac thought it was stupid, and he refused to schedule more than, I think, about 4,000 or 5,000 for the year. We wound up selling, despite his feeling it wouldn't sell. I think we sold like 45,000 the first year.
In 1965, John DeLorean became Pontiac general manager, and he left a lasting imprint, record sales, and development of one model, the Firebird, which is still a mainstay of Pontiac division. Then in 1969, he was tapped to head then-slipping Chevrolet. Success continued, but so did DeLorean's flamboyant lifestyle and friction with superiors, notably GM Vice President Roger Keyes.
Well, he didn't like any part of my approach, and he made it clear to me that I was not his choice, that he didn't think I could do it, and that the first opportunity he had, he was going to fix my wagon, which is that contributed dramatically to my peace of mind.
They didn't like the way you wore your hair, they didn't like the way you dressed, they didn't even like your friends. Is any of that accurate?
Well, I would say that there's a lot more than that he didn't like about me. So, but it was, I think it, you know, it was just a total difference of opinion. I think he considered me capricious and superficial, and I considered him a pompous ass.
Revelations like that are making a new book on DeLorean's life at GM a bestseller. The book came out only last fall, but the idea for it goes all the way back to DeLorean's bitter parting from General Motors in 1973. What DeLorean wanted written then was a no-nonsense book on GM that would open the huge corporation's boardroom from the inside. According to one report, DeLorean wanted a book to be a Bible of what he claimed were wrongs in the way GM did business. But after working long hours with Grosse Pointe author Patrick Wright, DeLorean changed his mind about the book. He tried to block publication, fearing the book would put obstacles in the way of his new sports car project. Wright then put a second mortgage on his house and brought the book out anyway.
Were you surprised when the book did come out?
Yeah, I was. In fact, I was very, very shocked, to be honest with you.
And after you had read it, were you concerned about its impact on your new company?
Much less so. I must say it still was, you know, my primary objection to the book, and I'd made a number of attempts to try to have it modified with Wright, which we couldn't get done. That's the reason it had never been published, was I was really trying to be constructive, and instead of that, I think that an awful lot of what was said turned out to be an indictment, and that was not my intention at all.
But maybe a thing of,
Wright stands by his text, which he says paints this portrait of DeLorean the man.
As an individual, he's somewhat mercurial. He's very, eschews pomposity. He is sort of a maverick, and it's not hard to understand how ultimately he came into conflict with the system at General Motors. At GM, he was sort of like a Pierre Cardin suit on a rack of Brooks Brothers. Oh, there were, you know, phone calls made to his friends along the line of, you know, what's wrong with John and why doesn't he, you know, shape up? And he considered this more or less an intrusion on his private life, and he felt that you know, his papers as an executive should be graded on the test scores and not how he's doing what he's doing in his non-work hours.
The book also tells how his female companions, always beautiful and much younger, galled GM higher-ups. He was married then to glamorous model Kelly Harmon, familiar now as the pretty face behind promotion of a Detroit radio station. Then divorced from Kelly and dates with Nancy Sinatra, Ursula Andress, even Pam Austin, the lady in the old Dodge Rebellion commercials.
I never have felt it necessary to explain my lifestyle. I do things my own way. Of course, I've always lived in really a very conservative way, although it was never perceived that way. You know, I don't drink at all. I haven't probably had more than a few glasses of wine or something in my whole lifetime. It's just not something I do. I'm not much for parties. I spend most of my time now with my kids. Yeah, I have a reasonably strong sex drive, which I happen to think is an important part of any guy. No man who ever accomplished something didn't have that one characteristic, in spite of the fact that some of them have a tendency to drive off of bridges in the process. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's it's just part of life.
But that didn't mean you had to date the Dodge Rebellion girl while you were at General Motors.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with that. You? What's that got to do with? I wasn't going to buy a Dodge, and she wasn't going to buy a Pontiac, so what's the difference?
Today, DeLorean is married to another beauty, Christina Ferrara, a cover girl who makes $2,000 a day. Christina is expected to help in the promotion of the DeLorean sports car when it goes into the dealer showrooms next fall. 30,000 of the automobiles per year are expected to be built. Production is to begin in July. Several large Detroit area dealers will handle the cars, but the two primary sales targets are sports car crazy California and the metropolitan New York area. For John DeLorean, this is the realization of a dream that started way back in the 60s.
Well, I've always felt there are some things I'd like to do without the particular restraints of a typical commercial the pure corporate atmosphere, where everything you do is a compromise because you've mixed in the judgments of literally thousands of people instead of your own. And it's always been my contention that the great cars that have been built in the world were usually built by one or very few people.
DeLorean's entry into the sports car field will be priced between $16,000 and $19,000. Have a V6 Renault French-built engine, rear-mounted and fuel-injected. Fuel economy, 22 miles per gallon city. Top speed, 120 miles per hour. The car has a fiberglass shell with a skin of stainless steel. DeLorean claims this gives it almost infinite life. Others say it will last 25 years or more. Instead of waxing your DMC-12, you brush it with a pad like this. And if you wonder about the timing and ask, isn't this a lousy economic climate for a new sports car? John DeLorean has an answer.
By the time we're aggressively promoting our sales, that by then, of course, you'll have a new president, or the election at least will be behind us, and hopefully the economy will be very much on the upswing.
The operant word is if the American consumer will buy the silver bullet long enough to get the company on its feet, if they can come up with new models that are relatively inexpensive derivatives of the DMC-12 and bring those to market, if they don't run into problems in the plant and the community, then they should be able to make a go of it.
This is a model of the first car John DeLorean was ever associated with, a Packard, a show car called the Predictor. He designed it along with this man, Bill Schmidt, in 1956. It was to have been Packard's 1957 model, but there never was a 57 Packard. Does a similar fate await the DMC-12? Or is this a more accurate omen? The rainbow, which formed just as we began taping at the DeLorean plant in Belfast.
My life has been characterized by being very lucky. I've always, I'm not a person who is very much concerned about economic circumstances. If I screw it up, it's my fault. And if we make it, then our people certainly are entitled to the credit that goes for having done that. At this point in time, I think the chances are very, very good, maybe 90% plus, that we're going to be a successful business.
So for the John DeLorean life story, which has been so much like a movie script, we still don't know if there's to be a happy ending. The final scene will be written by American sports car buyers.